The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Well, hello. Welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ.
Yeah, can you hear the introduction? Because the last few shows I have not been able to hear the introduction.
Yes, I'm
all I get is the.
I'm able to hear it.
All right, there's going to be something wrong with this because you guys are fading in and out. Okay, all right. I guess it's time for
Commander
COVID.
Okay, yesterday's Massachusetts.
Speaking from the red zone.
Yeah, speaking from the red zone. Yesterday's Massachusetts numbers was 138,651 total cases, 568 new cases, 9,452 total deaths, 23 new deaths. In Bristol County, we have 10,828 cases. Now, this was interesting because Paul Coogan did not come out with his report until, let me see what time it was exactly. This makes for an interesting thing. 6:54 p.m. yesterday. I was kind of surprised, but hey, what can you do? We have a total case count forward of 2,244, which is a 10-case increase, and we still continue to stay at 135 fatalities. But remember, we're in the red zone. And in response to a lot of questions that I've received, and I've actually confirmed with a high-ranking union member, the mayor did indeed say that he wants 3 weeks of data before he decides whether or not to close the schools. My personal opinion is we're in the red zone. We've already got 2 cases in the school system that we know about. How many more that we haven't been told about, I don't know. But how many cases is the school system going to have before the mayor and the school committee decide that it's time to go to remote learning only? That would be a common sense issue. But what's the least of all senses? Common sense.
There you go again, expecting common sense from government. I don't know, because that's kind of a real reach for government, because what they do is spend money and get irritated when people call them on spending money. So I know that Wednesday's show hackled a few feathers over in the ivory tower.
Yeah,
and it was they were upset because we were saying that the city has no money, and I guess you were told. I didn't have the luxury of a phone call to debate it, but I guess you did. And you were told that the city does have money. And, my response to that is we don't know what the city has. That's why we always call for a forensic audit, because Mary Sahadi says we got no money when she wants to gouge the taxpayer. And then when it's an election year, we got $8 million surplus. And then the mayor says one thing, and somebody else from the administration, be it the chief of staff, says something else. We do have money. We don't have money. They try to take away our health care because they're looking for nickels and dimes. But then they say, well, we've got money, but we need money for stamps. So look, forgive us if we're not sure. But I'm going to tell you one thing. We are students of history. And and I will always go with the historical perspective, which is this city is always on the verge of receivership. It hasn't been solvent since the 80s. And so I'm going with the fact that they need money for stamps because they're broke. And all they ever do is mishandle money, because all they do is look for short-term money to plug the holes up, and then they'll worry about funding it for perpetuity next year. where they'll rob some more short-term money from somewhere. So, but it's nice to know that they're watching.
It's always nice to know they're watching. That's for sure. Yeah, it's interesting because we've been talking about this for a long time, and that's why we want a forensic audit. But when you hear from administration after administration after administration that a forensic audit is only going to look for criminal acts, and yeah, we want to know if we're going to be looking for criminal acts because somebody's going to go to jail. Somebody has to go to jail because this is getting to be ridiculous. And these politicians, whether they be mayor, city council, school committee, whoever they may be, or appointed people, which are just as bad, feel that they're above the law and they're above accountability. And they don't realize that, hey, guess what? You are accountable to someone. You're accountable to me. And I know that, police and fire and EMS and teachers and everyone else hate it when a citizen turns around and says, hey, I pay your salary. But the truth be known, they do pay your salaries. And it's just a bad time to do it when you're in trouble or something. But again, it makes for an interesting scenario.
It's true. But the fact is that we pay everybody's salary because if they work for the city, their salaries by the taxpayers. The mayor, everybody in his staff, they're all paid. They all are supposed to work for us. But that therein lies the rub, as the Bard once said. They always complain, and like you said, we don't want a forensic audit because they're looking for criminal activity. Well, guess what? It doesn't make any difference, because even if you did participate in criminal activity or illegal activity, nothing's going to happen to you because you're a government official. Nothing ever happens. Politicians lie all the time. They misappropriate money. They are malfeasant.
Right.
And then they justify it. How many times have we heard at the city council say that we don't have to fund the health care? We do it that way in Seekonk. Well, that doesn't make it right, because you're violating a law, because the statute says that when you have a contract, it has to be funded. You go before the town council or the city council and get it funded. Now you have a commitment to fund it, because that's what the law says. You went there and told the city council or the town council, the ways and means, so to speak, that you do have the money to pay for this contract. That's when you don't go in the hole. Remember a long time ago when Attleboro Town Council shot down an arbitrator's award? And what happened when the town council, or the city council, Attleboro's a city, the city council shot down the award? The contract was null and void. The award was null and void. They didn't fund it. It's only binding on the mayor.
Correct.
So it just goes to prove that that there is a fiduciary and financial obligation when you have a contract. So they go before the council. If the council disapproved it, there would be no contract. But the thing is that our financial team goes before the council at the completion of every collective bargaining agreement and says that this contract is funded, which means fully funded. And I read the statute on his show one time. It doesn't say partially funded or funded to the degree we want. It's funded. So when you have a 75% premium obligation and it's $40 million, you can't put in $38 million. You're violating the law. But other politicians cover for other politicians and are allowed to get away with the law because nobody can hit the Powerball, so we can take them all to court and put them all in jail. Therein lies the problem, because the fact is that these people are malfeasant, and that is a crime. Because if you don't go to another governmental agency that does the same thing, go to a private sector company and say, do you think it's okay to not have enough money in your budget to run your company? To have to worry about stealing money and worrying if your neighbor's going to give you a loan, i.e. the taxpayers? They're going to say, absolutely not. That's fiduciary irresponsibility. But This is the way and if you notice, this is unique to cities like Fall River, New Bedford, Lawrence, Lynn, all the crap holes, all the ones with no money, poverty. You don't see this happening in Newton. You don't see this happening in Cambridge and Wellesley. They do things in accordance with the law because they run their budgets properly. But then they get upset when they get called on it. We don't want a forensic audit. Well, we should have a forensic audit because I still want to know about the 22 windows. And we are going to be discussing that on a further show because I had somebody call me and basically told me that they have a lot of information on it and that all the windows that were put in, the 22 that we never found out who did it, who authorized it and everything else, were all done, and none of them are in compliance. So obviously I have to get the full particulars, but when we do, we will probably have a special segment on that. But it's ironic that they get upset because we point out to the people, think about it. If you can't afford stamps, you don't have a hell of a lot of money, do you? You can't go to the post office and buy a book of stamps. Obviously, you are in financial trouble. When you go to look to try to manipulate a federal program to help you pay for stamps, you are not going to convince me that this city is financially stable. So there's my rant already.
I don't think it's a rant. I think it's very clear. But what I think is very interesting is Mike Rodrigues came out and said that it's raining. No kidding, it's raining. But he meant with the state budget and that they're going to dig deep into the rainy day fund to meet their budgetary needs. Guess what, Mike? Why don't you look at it this way? Instead of digging into the rainy day fund, why don't you cut all your pet projects out? Take those pet projects out of the budget. Get rid of them. Those pork barrel pet projects. Maybe that will save some money and you won't need to dip into the rainy day fund. This is not acceptable. It's not acceptable. And when I see 100,000 going to this and 200 going to that and 300,000 going to this and 500,000 going here and 1.5 million going there, it gets to be ridiculous, especially when they're pet projects that really aren't generating a lot for the state. Okay? It is not the state's responsibility to make sure that everyone gets a piece of the pie. It's the state's responsibility, because we're a commonwealth, we're not a state, to be sure that the local cities and towns get their share of the money that they're entitled to, and that's it. We don't have to maintain their roads. We don't have to maintain their sidewalks. That's for the cities and towns to do. And that may sound a little negative, but you know what? When you're in a financial crisis, you have to pick and choose what is the most important issues to take care of. And that's what becomes important. And that's where the budget should be going right now. Because everyone's saying we're broke. So if we're broke, don't start doing pork barrel projects because it's an election year. And that's why we're doing these pork barrel projects. It's an election year. You and I both know that shit.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, the irony of the thing is that, you know, even if they do tighten their belts, they don't really tighten their belts. They tighten your belt and my belt, because they'll tell the people who work that they're not going to get a pay raise. They're going to get zero because the city's in financial. But I can guarantee you there's no moratorium on automatic cost of living raises for all the politically appointed people in the city. They're getting their stipends and pay raises and snow stipends and everything else, just like in Boston. As a matter of fact, the irony, we always talk about something, and it's always something that's in the news. And this morning I heard they announced that Charlie Baker has cut the funding to the MBTA, which, as we know, is one of the largest dumping grounds for political hacks relatives in the state of Massachusetts. The Lottery Commission and the MBTA is where everybody's cousin that can't get a job gets a job.
Right.
All the politicians, that's where they get jobs. And they said that Charlie Baker is cutting the funding to the MBTA. But at the end of it, they said, well, they're cutting the funding, but they're still getting more than they got last year. So they're just not giving them even more than they were going to give them. They're getting more than they got last year. And do you think, I would say, and look, I'm not going to say it as an absolute, but I would think that the ridership on the MBTA is way down. They're always running in the red to begin with. And I think ridership on the MBTA, because I've gone to Boston numerous times lately, the traffic isn't anywhere near what it used to be. People are still not going to work because of COVID. You're not going to tell me that it wasn't a drastic reduction in ridership. So that means they're not getting in as much money, but they're still giving them more money to operate this year. They're cutting the amount, but like instead of giving them an extra 10 million, they're only going to give them like 5 million. But this is the way the government operates, because you know why? It's not their money. I can't go out and say, well, I'm just not going to stop spending money, even though I'm not getting a paycheck. We can't do that, but the government can, because we're their ATM machine.
Are we part of the Cirrus network?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but
the nice network.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
so I don't know.
Let's get to some national stuff. Did you watch either town hall meeting? Did you watch either of them?
That wasn't it hysterical? I mean, I don't know how anybody that isn't wearing tinfoil on their head to stop the aliens from eating their brain couldn't look at those two town halls yesterday and not realize that the mainstream media is now become an arm of the government.
Yep.
And one party.
Yes.
I mean, it was so obvious. I mean, we all know that. And it's scary because, Russia had Radio Pravda, the Chinese communists, nothing goes on their airwaves unless the government approves it. And fundamentally, nothing is being discussed that can inconvenience Joe Biden. I mean, he was at a town hall and he was reading off his notes, which means they probably gave him the questions beforehand because he had to. And they were all softballs. It was like throwing watermelons at him so he could hit it. And then you get Trump's town hall, and Savannah Guthrie interrupted him more than he interrupted Biden in the other debate, which doesn't bother me because I like lively debates. It doesn't really bother me. But to show you how bad it was an absolute ambush by Guthrie, which isn't a problem. You know, you're a big boy. You got your big boy pants on when you run for president, or at least you should have. You shouldn't have to be treated like you got cotton wrapped around you like a snowflake, like they're doing with Joe. But the reality is that the fact is, even though it was an absolute attempt at an ambush, there are people that are livid with NBC that they even allowed the president of the United States to have a town hall. They want to just ignore him. It's just like history. We want to erase it. Let's just erase him and tell everybody what we want to tell them. And there was not one question about the allegations about his son, which are pretty serious. And I'm not saying he's guilty. But do you think as a reporter, you should ask him for a comment on that? Because what they're talking about basically is a criminal offense. You know, they're accusing them of using political leverage and power to become millionaires and billionaires. And supposedly there's documented evidence. So you think as a reporter, you would ask them, at least ask him to make a comment or or at least take a position. And they still let him get away with, I'll let you know now. It's not, I'm going to let you know after the election. It's you know what the best one was for me, CJ, when they asked him if they were going to pack the courts. And then they said, don't you think the public deserves to know? Do you hear that?
You kind of froze up there for a second.
No, I'm saying I'm hearing a phone ringing in the back.
Yeah, that's on my end.
Oh, okay. But they asked them, and of course they had to revise their position because I guess their polling told them that people weren't happy that he said you'll know after the election. So now they've revised it. He said, yes, the people do deserve to know, and they'll know after we see what happens with the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett. Well, that's basically answering the question, because what they're going to say is, well, you packed the court, so we're going to pack the court after I get elected, which is an absolute, distortion of truth. It's like a politician telling you that he cares about you. They're not packing a court. They may not like the nominee because they want the court to be political, and she has a different political philosophy and a religious philosophy. And by the way, Dianne Feinstein got caught on a hot mic talking about her religious preferences, which, they were all trying to not show. But the thing is that when you looked at those two debates and drew the comparison of Stephanopoulos throwing watermelons at him, and the other guy with him, actually, I think they said it was 20 minutes of arguing between the moderator and Trump before they got to a town hall.
Correct.
Person. And that's what it was supposed to be for. So, I mean, it is so obvious. But something, I don't mind people going after people. We do it all the time, but we stay on the subject. All right, she wants to, you put your big boy pants on, come on out, and let's do the the House of Commons like we like. But the fact is, but let's do it for both people. Let's do it for both candidates. You want to get down and dirty, you want to dig into stuff, but I mean, it's a national conspiracy. Twitter and Facebook is erasing everything that has to do with one candidate, and they allow anything, whether it's factual or not, about the other candidate to be on the air. So, I hate to tell you people, and, they say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. But fundamentally, we're well on the road to being like Russia and China, because it's a scary proposition when the politicians control the mainstream media and you only hear what they want you to hear. And it's all, that narrative is always fashioned to support their position. And that's a dangerous thing for everybody's personal freedoms.
Yep, that's Pravda. That's how it works. But there were a lot of questions on why these shows went back to back. I mean, Trump had 1 hour, Biden had 2. Here's what happened. NBC gave Biden an hour on the air. And as such, they were required under FCC regulations to give Trump an equal time. So they had to give him an hour. Now I want to see if ABC, aka Disney, now gives Trump 2 hours for a town hall like they gave to Biden. And will the questions be the same if they give it to them, or will they not give it to him at all? It's going to be interesting. I was almost ashamed to say that George Stephanopoulos was from Fall River.
Yeah, I've always been ashamed to say that. He's like, he is the prototype political tick. He's been hanging around forever. And but look, as you said, they're going to give him 2 hours, probably not. But the fact is, if it does, it's going to be the same crap show as it was last night. I mean, but it disturbs me of what we're looking at here. whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, you should be in fear if you're a normal citizen, unless you're a lunatic left-wing radical. You should be in fear. We see a government takeover of the media. We see the party saying that we want to take over the Supreme Court and make it a political body, not a judicial body. We want this to be an arm of our party or any party that's in power, because what they'll do is they'll stack the court. And if we begin that precedent, we may end up with 100 judges in the Supreme Court, because let's say, for your argument's sake, the Democrats take over both the Senate and the House and the presidency, and they raise it up to 15. Then at some point in time, when people get tired of living in a socialist country, the Republicans get back in power. So now they're going to need a majority. So then we'll go up to 25 justices. And then after that, it'll be 50. And before you know it, it's going to be like the House of Commons. I mean, you're going to have, it's ridiculous. That is not what the founding fathers created. A tripartite system, 3 separate parts of government. The judicial branch is not a lawmaking branch. It is a judicial branch. But this is what they want, and people should be afraid of that. They're all nodding their head saying, yeah, it's okay. But I'm going to tell you something, CJ. It's not okay for me to live in a society where if I use the wrong pronoun, I can be put in jail for a hate crime. But if I have a conservative view on something, somebody from the left can shoot me in the face. And you have a college professor saying that's morally okay, because in their eyes, I'm a fascist. There's something innately wrong with what's going on in the United States. There's something radically wrong with something that's going on, because it's okay. There have been people assassinated. The guy shot the guy that maced him in the face with the person the guy that got assassinated up in Portland. Oh, he was a fascist. They laid in wait and they assassinated him. And they're saying it on Twitter and everywhere that it's okay to kill people with a different view. That is not America. That is China. That is Russia. That is not America. So whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you better take note. You better take note. Running around the streets, destroying people's property, and having somebody tell you it's okay to shoot another human being in the face because they have a different political opinion. There goes America down the toilet. So to me, it's unconscious to even think about that.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. And it's interesting that Facebook and Twitter are now banning the story about Hunter Biden. They've blocked it. You can't see that story on either Facebook or Twitter. And so this tells you where Mark Zuckerberg is and where Facebook is as a corporation in trying to sway the election. That's what they're doing. They're trying to sway the election. And that is not acceptable at all. And I'm sorry to say this, but I don't need somebody else to censor my information for me. I am a big boy, and I can make my own decisions on what is correct and what is not, because I can do my own fact checking. I don't need Facebook to do fact checking for me. And that's become the problem. But when you make a company like Facebook your only source of news, you have a bigger problem. Well, we're out of time. So I want to thank you for allowing us into your home. Thank you for watching. And remember, if you've got questions or comments, send them to us here at Spindle City Straight Talk. Remember, stay safe and stay angry. Thanks for watching.